public wishing to speak to the council on any item can come forward in the room, and City Clerk or Vice Mayor, I'll just have you help me with that part.
Mayor, we have no one in the room.
Okay. We'll close the public comment period and move on to the first work session, budget development, resident survey, city manager.
Good evening. First thing we're going to be discussing is the fiscal year 25-26 biennium budget survey that we've been conducting for the last month and change. It wrapped up on the 15th. We've been calculating the data since then, and we have it ready for you guys tonight. As far as the reasoning for it, Sweet. So, as I said, biennium budget survey. There we go. So the purpose of the survey was mainly to engage residents, kind of understand the services, programs, facilities that are important to them and how they'd like to see these things funded. It was a first step as we begin this development process, as you're all aware. It was a good way to kind of gauge as well how to fund these programs as national costs rise across the nation. And those were some of the main purposes for why we conducted this. We conducted quite a few marketing and outreach efforts in order to kind of inform people this survey was taking place and get as many respondents as we possibly could. This included social media posts every Friday on both the city Facebook and Instagram pages, articles in several news outlets local to here, including the Laramie Reporter, County 5, articles like that. We had radio ads as well as radio interviews. We had 2 radio interviews and we had a radio ad running throughout the course of this. We collaborated with a number of community partners such as the LCBA, Laramie Main Street Alliance, Laramie Soup Kitchen, and the Epson Center to try and gauge a diverse perspective to make sure we were able to reach as many people as possible. We encouraged word of mouth because we're aware that not everyone consumes this media, and even if you do, you may have missed it. So this is a way to ensure that maybe neighbors talk to neighbors, friends talk to friends, and we can really get the message out there and have people take the survey and provide their input. So that was another way we encouraged it at the end of the survey. Finally, we mentioned it in staff reports at the Environmental Advisory Committee as well as in meetings for various community organizations throughout the surveying period. There were some ways that we made sure that this was valid, comparing it with census data and making sure that this was representative of our community as a whole. The first way we did that was, before we even did that, actually, we did have a deduplication procedure, courtesy of this Zen City software we've been using. There's a deduplication procedure it can use in order to ensure that people are not, and this was a good language, this is a good way to phrase it that I liked, was stuffing the ballot box. So we initially had 723 submissions. Upon using this deduplication software, we had 572. So throughout that process, that means that people either use the same device to take this several times or use different browsers on the same device, things like that. So this software tracks both IP addresses and it tracks digital fingerprints within browsers. The IP addresses are stored in a way that they are in a series of numbers and letters as opposed to the actual IP address to make sure that survey takers cannot be tracked. This is simply just an encoded way to make sure that it doesn't come up multiple times. So the city of Laramie, Zen City, none of them have these IP addresses, this information. They can't track these people. Simply a way to ensure it's not duplicated multiple times. First, the thing we compared with our census data was age demographics. As you can see here, the least represented group, the most underrepresented group, was the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. That bar speaks for itself. The blue bar would be the estimate of the census population. Is that one not working? So the blue would be the estimate of the census population, whereas orange is the percentage of survey takers. So 38.72, about 38% of the population is between 18 and 24. and about 4.66% of survey takers were in that age demographic. So very big discrepancy there, something we will be looking to address on the next survey. One age group we did find almost perfect representation was in the 25 to 34-year-old age demographic. We had 20.85% of the population versus 18.42% of the respondents. So that was very representative. That was by far the most, almost even there on that graph demographic. The highest overrepresentation was 35 to 44 years of age, with 12.3% of the population versus nearly 30% of the survey takers. So we did very well marketing to them. So now we just, whatever we did there, we need to expand outwards. But as far as finally going out to the older demographics, it slowly gets more and more representative, but they are all overrepresented in comparison to the younger demographics. So as we go on in this slideshow, I'll kind of present some ways that we plan on addressing these discrepancies. The next way that we ensured it was valid was through education demographic data, again, census over survey takers. As you can see here, a very large overrepresentation of those with graduate and bachelor's degrees, which does make sense. We are a college town. We do have a very large percentage of citizens with those backgrounds. However, they made up a larger percentage of the respondents than they do in the population. So 28.75% have a graduate degree, but 42% took the survey. And again, bachelor's about 27.5%, but the survey was taken with about 36% of respondents having a bachelor's degree. So the groups that were least represented were those without a college degree and those who may not have a high school diploma. So those are some groups that, again, we'll discuss ways that we could address them going forward in these future surveys. One sample that was representative are those with associate's degrees, vocational, technical degrees. Those with that sort of education, they were about representative. One more group that we did look for is employment status within the city of Laramie and through respondents of this survey. The underrepresented groups were the most underrepresented group was those not in the labor force, so retired, students, those who are not seeking employment for any number of reasons. That group was far underrepresented throughout this survey. We found that unemployed residents were a little bit underrepresented, not quite to the extent that those not in the labor force were, but that is another group that we do need to try and get more responses from going forward. An overrepresentation in the employed group of those in Laramie, with that exceeding the percentage of those in the census. One more thing, the respondents indicating that they were students only made up about 4.5% of those indicating versus 38.47% of the Laramie population being students. So going forward, addressing any sort of educational institution with those 18 and over is going to be a great way to kind of get that student involvement that we may not have had here. And again, here are some of the recommendations we had. So as far as those 18 to 24, as well as those that are students, maybe engaging with ASUW, trying to engage with that campus community to try and bring that engagement up with that young adult demographic. With those with less educational attainment, maybe on community partner agencies that may work with those folks, trying to get this survey out there, make sure they take it. Finally, unemployed residents, those who are not in the labor force, we could use community partners, public libraries. There's an awesome kiosk feature with this software, so we could provide kiosks in public buildings, try and bring people in that way and have them bring in their responses if they don't have access to technology or internet at home. We also did provide paper copies, which was something that I think was very valuable throughout this process. So that was something that was very good. As far as what they told us, this is where we really get into the meat of it, so I apologize in advance for all of the data I'm about to dump on you. As far as initially, the first question we asked before we got into any of the budget questions was simply, are you a resident of Laramie or do you live in the wider Albany County area? This helps us both understand maybe geographic prioritizations. Maybe if you live in the county, you prefer emergency services versus where if you're in the city, maybe infrastructure is your biggest priority. So having that geographic data really helps us kind of narrow down who thinks what and how we can work with that. So that was something that I think was very helpful doing this. The first question that we asked, and this was exactly as you would expect it, the amount of time living in Laramie, by far the most common, nearly 50%, was living in Laramie over 20 years. So nearly half of respondents have lived here for over 20 years, and it was a correlation, positive correlation between amount of time and likely to respond. It went down based on the amount of time you've lived here, with less than 2 years being by far the lowest rate. So that seemed pretty on brand with what would be expected. So that was something that we did notice. As far as this next question, we did break Laramie into 6 geographic regions in order to kind of generalize what these ideas were dependent upon the region. And I'll quickly name them off for you, so when I show you this graph on the next slide, that provides a little context. But number 1 is going to be labeled west. Number 2 will be labeled north. Number 3 will be east. Number 4 will be the south region. Number 5 will be downtown and west side. And then number 6 will be the UW campus area. So those are the 6 geographic regions we laid out. And this is the graph indicating which geographic regions these respondents were from. So as you can see, 33%, a third of the survey takers were from the south side of Laramie. So that was a hot spot. A lot of people on the south side very invested in the budget. So that was something we did notice. The north side was second at about 21.5%. East, third at about 18.5%. The West Laramie was about 14%, and from there we found that downtown Laramie and the UW campus area were the lowest response rates, with downtown and west side being the lowest. And one more tool that we did get to use here was this pin placement map. So we can ask respondents voluntarily if they'd like to drop a pin, kind of indicate where they live within Laramie and even wider Albany County, because this helps consider actually into the data. It helps compute all that, which is very cool. As you can see, as shown in the last slide, south side of Laramie, huge hotspot. Something that I thought was very notable was that there are a number of pins out in the county, and some of them go pretty far out. So I think that that was an interesting thing that we were able to do, is get responses from that far out in the county, and it shows that even if you live in the county, you come here, you use the services, you shop at the shops, and this matters. And so I think getting that perspective that far out was important, and I'm really glad we were able to reach those people.
Mayor and Vice Mayor and Council, I wanted to interject here and say, if you go back one slide, Brandon, I did review our community survey going back to its first iteration in 2002, and the map that we used, that Brandon just showed you, we have used consistently for over a decade now. But I want to tell you, where you see here that we had a high response rate from, or a high percentage of respondents from the south and the north, that is consistent with our overall community survey. And the reason for that is our density, and so I want to make sure that this doesn't appear that the north part of the community and the south are overrepresented. I don't believe that they are. It's that we have pretty exceptional density in that southern section of Laramie and also in the northern section of Laramie, as compared to the far east and the far west, where density is much, much lower. The west side typically does get a higher response, as you see here, about a third of respondents, simply because it's so geographically large. Not dense, but still quite a few people in that big, broad west portion.
Councilor Doherty?
Yeah, so I was wondering what the denominator is in this percent. It's of the people that responded. So there aren't that many people that live in the downtown west side. So do you have it with population? Do you have that number for what the population is in those?
So we don't have the exact numbers on exactly that density and how that would size up with the entire proportion.
All right, so it's the percent of respondents, not percent of population. Okay, thank you.
Is it the percent of the city resident respondents? So not
Yes. Yeah, so this, the demographics specifically are pertaining to city residents, and there will be one slide that indicates county residents separately in order to kind of demonstrate that geographic.
I have one question, and I'm just curious, when you eliminated the possible duplicates, if you had a household where individuals within the household, same IP, are responding and they're using the same computer, but they're two different responses, would you be able to differentiate and see that their responses were different? Or would one member of the household just lose their survey?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, that's a great question. I think that if that were the case, then they would only be able to respond once with that device. And that is an issue, and I think that's part of why, going forward, we would like to do that kiosk system in public buildings and things like that if there are a limited number of devices in a household. I think that would be a great opportunity to kind of circumvent that kind of thing. But at this time, yeah, the deduplication would remove that if it was the same device.
I can't remember, was there a note or a notification as you began that survey that would be happening?
Vice Mayor, yes, it did let you know that it will be gathering your IP address in order to ensure that it does not take
But it didn't
submissions.
tell them, 200 seems like a large stuffing the ballot number. So it seems like we probably miss people who are using the same device in the same household.
Yeah, and I've reached out to our Zen City representative about that, but I can follow up and have them take a closer look and see if maybe there was more to it than that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your work.
So yep, as I said, pin placements, we had very wide, county-wide interaction, and that was something we were happy to see. As far as city services and programs and their ranking, this question took 13 city services, programs, and facilities, and it inquired the respondent to rank them 1 through 13 in order to kind of get a baseline understanding. So this graph is a little dense, so I'll try and break this down a little bit. The blue bar that's on the left side is going to indicate a first quartile. So these are split into 4 quartiles. Of the rankings, the first quartile is 1 through 3, second quartile is 4 through 6, third quartile is 7 through 9, and fourth quartile is 10 through 13. This was the way to best demonstrate this data in a way that was coherent, because a 13-bar, 13-color graph along this side was almost nonsense. So this was the easiest way to kind of break that down. So those with a blue bar that's high are going to be receiving that percentage of total rankings for that category in that ranking. So those with a high blue bar receive the most fourth quartile lowest priority rankings, and vice versa. Those with the gray or an orange there in the middle, those are going to be kind of second and third quartile, middle of the pack, kind of middle priority items. So I think that could be better explained on the next slide, which we kind of broke it down. Public safety services were the highest ranking. Drinking water was also ranked very highly or very low. It was either in the first quartile or the fourth quartile, very few second and third quartile rankings. So as far as wastewater and stormwater, those were consistently ranked in the first quartile. Winter road maintenance and economic development were commonly ranked in the fourth quartile. Road maintenance and construction more commonly in the lower quartile, although there were some rankings in the first. So some people that were a high priority, more they were in the lower, but typically it was kind of a split with more being lower. This comes to the question of allocating funding. This was a question that some people expressed struggles with, and we will be talking about that later on in the slideshow. However, this question gauged with sliders. It asked the respondent to kind of allocate funding with $1 million. You can allocate funding to all of the categories seen on that pie chart based on how you feel they should be funded. So this was a fun exercise, hopefully to kind of engage them in the process. You allocate the funding, you kind of understand how the process works. So this was how that funding was allocated. Roughly 25% of funding went to emergency services in total, so police protection, fire protection, and emergency medical services. First individually was street and alley maintenance, followed by maintaining infrastructure at about 10.5%, and then preservation of water resources around 9%. The individual lowest rankings were, the lowest was nuisance code enforcement at under 2%, fostering a sense of community at around 2%, and then third to last was beautification of entryways and public areas at a little under 3%. So those were the areas that were the least allocated in this exercise.
Vice Mayor, may I ask a question? Sorry, thank you.
Councilor Richardson?
Thank you. Is there any, it was just interesting to me because on the slide before, road maintenance and construction were in the lower quartile. And then this next slide, it's higher, maintaining, or where did it go here? Street and alley maintenance. So is there any sense of what the difference would be there? Is it just, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, through you. So I think that was kind of where I tried to go with discussing this earlier, is specifically with, I believe it was road maintenance and construction and reconstruction. There was a larger yellow bar there, but there was also a decently large blue bar indicating that a number of residents did find that to be their top 3 of the 13 categories priority. So I think maybe those who did prioritize it might have prioritized it very heavily in the funding. They might have funded it quite a bit versus otherwise they may have received just a pretty average or lower amount of funding. So there could be outliers there. Back to where we were. So next up, there was increasing the cost of goods, services, and labor purchased by the city. As the national costs rise, kind of inquiring what respondents would like to see done in order to fund these. So for the first ranking of the 4, the highest percentage in the first ranking was putting a 7-cent sales tax on the ballot for a vote. That was around roughly 40% of the first of the 4. So that was the most popular in the first category, was a 7-cent sales tax vote. Second was user fees being increased in the areas where the costs are increasing to kind of balance that out. The drawing from a reserved fund was most commonly ranked 4th there at that yellow bar. So nearly 50% of respondents ranked pulling from a reserved fund and budgeting to fill it later as their lowest priority or least wanted. Reducing services was ranked equally amongst the 4, as you can see, about 27-28%, with second being a little lower. So it was just about equally placed across to reduce those services. This slide covers we had an open field question that did ask respondents to mention if there was a service program or facility or some other city priority that wasn't included, please let us know. Please provide kind of your thoughts and what you think may not have been included or what you really prioritize. So these were the words that it picked out that were the most commonly mentioned: housing, infrastructure, transportation, and sidewalks. Those dark red words were the highest or most included. The dark black words were the second most, and going down it was less. So that was an interesting exercise to kind of see, when giving people the freedom to really speak on it, what they were able to say and what they prioritized the most. As far as Albany County residents go, they made up about 13% of respondents. So this slide includes their responses as well. Their most heavily prioritized were emergency services, wastewater, which is sewage, green spaces, and garbage and recycling collection. Drinking water, winter road maintenance, and road maintenance and reconstruction were the lowest ranked amongst county residents. As a group, allocation preferences were, again, emergency services, the most common there. Street and alley maintenance and maintaining infrastructure around 23%, 10% of funding to water resources, and then combined nuisance code enforcement, paving unpaved roads, and beautification were just around 4%. Most common first choice for balancing the budget was to reduce services. So of that slider there that we showed on the last slide, reducing services that are increasing in costs was the county residents outside of city limits' most preferred way to deal with that increase. Second most common, increasing user fees. The most common second choice, my apologies, was the increasing in user fees. Voting on a 7-cent sales tax was slightly more popular than reserve fund and budgeting to replenish. That was the last choice at about 46 and a little over 0.5%. As far as lessons learned through this survey, there were a few things we learned. This was a learning process, and there was a lot of good feedback, so I think we're going to really be able to apply that going forward. I do appreciate the constructive criticism that was provided to us. it was our first fully digital survey. Paper copies were the way we used to go, and this is a tool we've been learning to use, so obviously there will be hiccups, there will be things to learn, and I think that this was a really good way to start to develop more muscle there. Every complaint we received, we tried to log and include in the process going forward. Future improvements, demographic questions, we'll start to form those around the census to make sure we can really compare that one-to-one, so we can really have it exactly how the census phrases it, because I think that'll be even more helpful forming those demographic visuals and really being able to make sure that this is representative going forward. Earlier planning on outreach, doing even more to reach out to local organizations and community partners, even more media if we're able to, and really making sure everyone in town knows about this. Finally, broader demographic response options. There were indications that some people did want a self-employed option, for instance, those who may own businesses that weren't able to indicate that option. So that's something we did listen to and we will try to include in the next survey. And then the question that we received the most feedback on, this was the budget slider question. A number of people did indicate that this was a difficult question, and I do understand that, because it's a lot when you're looking at it and you've got these sliders, you got to balance out this budget, and if you go over, it's totally understandable. So this was something that we were made aware of that was difficult. So going forward, we're going to try and find a way to reformat this question in a way that's a lot more accessible, a lot easier to use, and can really capture people's opinions in a way that's, you don't have to sit there for 30 minutes and really think through it, because that's not what you want to be doing. So that was one thing we will be working on going forward, is reformatting that question in a way that's easier to be indicated on. Finally, as far as respondent completion rates, this is something else we'd like to work on going forward, is trying to reduce that attrition through this survey. As you can see, there were 572 unique respondents of those 720-ish initial respondents. 498 of that 572 were city residents, and 74 were county residents, as indicated in that first question shown earlier. Approximately 72% of city residents completed the survey, and that dropped to 60% approximately for county residents. So those are, around 3/4 of city respondents did finish the survey, and 6/10 of the county did. So we could get those numbers up, and we do think that that budget slider question may have been a large contributor to that. So going forward, we're going to try and reformat that. The one outlier, that 25% on the pin drop question, that was not required. That was simply if they wanted to voluntarily indicate closer to where they live. So that's going to be lower than the rest simply out of that cause. The demographic questions were universally answered across the board, that we didn't lose anyone on that page. So that's one thing we did have good response and completion rates there. And as far as that goes, that is the data. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the data.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Yeah, I looked at it, and when I saw that slider, I'm like, well, I don't know what, even though we do the budget, I don't have those numbers in my head to know, well, how much does the fire department need per, compared to the police department, or compared to streets, and, so I thought that's when I bailed out. I also wasn't sure if I was supposed to take it, but I thought, well, without any context, is $100 enough for parks? Oh, I don't know, so that's my feedback on it, but thanks.
Any other questions?
Another question.
Councilor Richardson?
I don't have a question, just a comment, so I can
A
hold.
comment. Questions or comments we'll do
Okay.
now.
All right, thank you.
In
Sorry
work
to
session.
throw that off. Thank you so much for putting all of this together. It is great to see all of these pieces broken down, and really nice to have a picture of it. And I'm glad that we had the number of respondents we did. Along with Councilor O'Doherty, the feedback I heard was confusion on that as well, but they said, oh, but once I figured out you move that slider and then it automatically populates, and then I kind of got the hang of it. So I think if they played around enough, they kind of got a sense of what was happening. But so I'm glad that you guys are aware of that and being thoughtful about how to adjust for next time. So thanks for all of your work.
City Clerk, are there any hands raised on?
None on Zoom at this time.
Thank you.
Just a couple.
Vice Mayor.
Counselor Gabriel.
Thank you. Could you remind me again of the time frame people had to answer this?
Yes, so it was through you, Vice Mayor. It was through approximately the end of December to the middle of February on February 15th.
Very good. And then I did not, maybe I missed this, but did you indicate the Laramie Boomerang as one source for people?
Through you, Vice Mayor. I don't believe the Laramie Boomerang covered. It was the Laramie Reporter that did do an article and reach out about it.
Right. So there wasn't anything in the local newspaper? Okay.
Excuse me, but we did, excuse me, Mayor, Councilmember Gabriel, we did send press releases out, obviously, but I don't believe it was picked up.
Okay.
Yep.
And then one final thing.
Counselor Gabriel.
So what do you think can be done, since we have the highest population of 18 to 24 and had the lowest response rate of less than 5%, right? What do you think can be done to engage those individuals?
Through you, Vice Mayor. I think that's something we're going to really need to look into, and I think we'll have time now, since we've completed this survey, until next year, next 2 years, to really sit there and gauge that out. I think engaging with the campus community will be really important, since that's such a large congregation of people in that age range. And I think looking into maybe community agencies or partners that may bring in a younger crowd, or looking into places downtown maybe that bring in a younger crowd, things like that. I think those might be ways we can engage them. I think social media is the avenue that a lot of young people use. So we did try to hammer that, and maybe we can hammer that in a little more and really try to work through the social media a little more. And maybe if we can get other organizations to collaborate and also share this on social media, we could reach the younger demographic a little better.
Thank you.
Counselor Pierce.
You know, I was actually pretty impressed by that population of what it was like 35 to 44, kind of that middle. They responded really a lot. And, you know, folks at that age are busy, right? They're running around, and they took the time to do this, which is quite impressive from my perspective. And this was interesting. This was really interesting. I'm impressed that we've got this information, actually. I think it's good, and I'd like to see, you know, as it grows and we refine it, I think it'll be great.
Thank you. And two things. I think in reaching the university that they sometimes get insulated in that campus area, and I wonder about advertising in the branding iron and providing a QR code where they can just get right in and take it. Secondly, maybe even putting posters or going through ASUW or through student affairs to try and get their opinion. But my comment is that I took the survey and I thought it was very easy to take, of course, until I got to the sliding things. And I had never seen that, which may be a component of my age. But once I learned how to use it, then I went to the more pragmatic, where how does it relate to what I actually do? And once I let go of that and just took it as an exercise and of setting priorities, I thought it was fun to do. You know, so I thought it was a good survey, wasn't too long, easy to follow. I think you did good work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor, I do think that there are several ways we could cross that hurdle going forward. I think one would be providing better instructions if we do go with that same format going forward. Another one was when we did provide those paper copies, the paper copies we did receive, which were 3. We did receive 3 paper copies. They were not included in the data due to the difference in medium and the time frame there, that they may have skewed the data a little bit. But that was a good medium. I think people had less trouble with good old pen and paper versus the sliders and all the stuff going on. So I think that was another great way we were able to overcome that hurdle. So going forward, I think offering those paper copies as a supplement is another way we can overcome that. And then the kiosk, like I mentioned earlier, I think having someone there that can explain that can really, you know, guide them a little bit on how to use it, and then hands off and let them do their thing. I think that would be another great way to kind of help that be a little more accessible.
Questions or comments? Councilor O'Doherty?
And yet, people over, what age was that? I mean, we got a disproportionate number from people my age or, you know.
Mine?
Yeah, so they must have not had too much trouble with it.
I had not seen the slider feature before, but once I got it and I liked it. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the work you did, and I think, as Councilor Pierce said, this is some really good information.
Council, just to wrap this up, Brennan did a great job. Jen and I were very appreciative to have him on this with us. I wanted to share just a few things with you. I did, as I said, go back and pull up our community survey, which asked similar questions about the priority for allocating funds that our residents might have. But I thought, you know, hey, did this first-time digital survey through Zen City fetch largely different respondent types than we have in the past? And what I thought was interesting, so to this issue of age, when you look back to 2006 through 2019, the last time those are all intervals when we did a community survey, our 18 to 24-year-old category, the highest percent of responses we've ever had was in the 2012 survey, and it was 12%. In 2006, it was 2.5. In 2008, it was 1.5. In 2015, it was 8.9. And in 2019, it was 7.9. So that's a pervasive issue, right? And we can all imagine the reasons that maybe if you're 18 to 24 and you're just going to be here for a year or two, you don't want to take the time to fill out the community survey. But definitely an area where we've had pervasive issues. And then when you look at the 25 to 34 age group and the 35 to 44, again, participation just jumped up, even in our community surveys going back over a decade now. So that is consistent, at least, with what we saw with the broader community survey. And then lastly, the question about, well, how long have you lived in Laramie, and who responded based on years of residence? Again, for people that have been here less than 2 years, the highest response rate we ever received was 11.1%. So I think that that's part of it. It's probably a community, a college community issue where, you know, our people invested when they may not envision that this is really their home, right, for the long term. So something we can work on, because as I think you'll agree, we want to serve those people, but we'd like to understand their preferences better. Wrapping up the last slide here, Council, so how do we intend to use the feedback from our budget survey? We've gathered the resident input. We will marry it with the community survey that I just referenced, which also provides valuable information about people's priorities. And then along with that, adding the public testimony and public comment that we may get during the budget public hearings and review sessions. So I will take all of this into account as I prepare my recommended budget for you. In fact, started budget meetings today, so it is timely to be starting the budget conversation. It takes internal about 2 months for staff to pull together the budget. I'll be in hearings for the next probably 4 weeks or so with department heads, and then we will put that recommended budget in a publication format for the public and for you all. You will then consider the recommended budget in public meetings held in late April and throughout May, and then accept more public testimony in those meetings, and then ultimately adopting the budget in June. So that's how that will all of this data will roll up through our processes over the next 4 to 5 months. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, I may have you just handle public comment. I can't see the chambers, so if you wouldn't mind just offering public comment, I'd sure appreciate it.
Yes. Do we have any public comment on this work session item? City Clerk, is there anyone online with their hand raised?
No hands on Zoom.
Okay. Well, then, seeing none, we will leave that topic and move on to stormwater funding feasibility study. Director Webb? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, for tonight's stormwater presentation, I'm going to hand it over to our consultant, WSP. They've been working very closely with city staff and also our stormwater focus group as we've kind of been working through this process over the next several months. So,
Thank you.
Hello, good
Welcome.
evening. My name is Aaron Murray. I'm a local engineer in town. I manage the branch of WSP. We were in front of you, it's probably 18 months ago in September of 2022 after we completed phase 1 of this effort. At that time, we had a different company name. We were Wood, now we're WSP, but same team. It's Elizabeth and I, just different name. But yeah, thank you for having us. Start us off here today. There we go. All right, so we're going to first recap what we did in phase 1 because it has been a while. Then we'll update you on the progress that we've made on phase 2 so far, including feedback from some stormwater focus group meetings that we've had. We'll talk about level of service and recommendations for the levels of service. We'll ask you some key policy questions we'd like some input on, and then talk about where we're going to go next, and then be open for discussion. So the city, before they even started this effort, recognized that there was a need for an improved level of service for stormwater management. Over the past 12, 14 years, the city has done 3 master plans for different portions of the city, and then a follow-on citywide master plan to combine them all and prioritize the projects. And through that effort, they identified $130 million in capital improvement projects needed to safely pass flows through the city. When we say safely manage runoff, that's if a 100-year event were to happen, can we get it through the storm sewer system, the pipes, the streets, without impacting private property, without causing public safety issues? Of that 130 million, about 30 million were prioritized as high priority. So I would focus more on that number, the 130 million, because when you do a master plan, you look at future potential growth and you're planning for the worst, I don't know the worst case, but the most development that could happen over a long period of time. So a lot of those projects are, if development were to occur, you need to do this. The $30 million are, hey, these are what you need to fix the problems you have right now. The city also recognizes that the current staffing levels aren't able to provide proactive maintenance. It's really reactive. After a storm, something fails, let's go figure out why. And so we don't really have an idea of, are there existing problems where the system is about to fail? The master planning effort is really, is the existing system undersized, not is it in a condition where it may fail? So we don't know that piece of it. The city right now is able to do street sweeping as part of stormwater maintenance, and they have a jet truck, and so they can do some of that, but it's really reactive. They also recognize that stormwater quality management is a piece that there's an existing issue where the Laramie River is listed as impaired. Some communities over 50,000 people have stormwater permits. Laramie doesn't have that yet, but it's possible it could come. So there's a stormwater quality piece that the city wants to improve the level of service on. So in phase 1, we quantified how much is the city currently spending on stormwater, and it's coming out of the general fund right now, and it's somewhere around, I think we have a slide later, $1.8 million. That's a capital project or 2 every year. That's some of the street sweeping, some of the emergency repairs. So we developed level of service menus to say, well, what if you wanted to get to this level in O&M, this level in maintenance, to where you're doing $5 million of projects every year and so forth, or maybe you want to go to a high level and do $10 million of projects every year, just to develop a menu and put a rough cost to that to determine, where you might want to get to. And we discussed drainage fees as a method to distribute those stormwater management costs among property owners. And kind of the bottom line in that quote there is, the basic question is not whether new revenue is needed, but how do you distribute that cost among the property owners that you're providing those services to. So these are those 3 level of service options: a basic, a median or medium, and high. These are just, there's some more detailed slides we'll show you later, but these are just kind of the highlights of that type of menu. And so, for example, you can see in the basic, and that's an improvement over current services. You'd address those high priority projects over a 20-year period. If you move to the medium, you'd fund that to address those over a 10-year period. Under the high, you'd address that over a 5-year period. And it's kind of similar if you look at maintenance costs, you'd add 2 workers in the basic, you'd add 4 in the median and 6 in the high, so that you're inspecting that system maybe a third of it every year in the high category, and maybe you're only inspecting 10% of it in the median, that kind of thing. This is what we presented as those approximate costs to you at the end of phase 1. And in that you can see the left column is the baseline in fiscal year 22, so a little under $1.9 million. That's general fund money. The middle column is what are the projected costs for FY23. And so you can see it's 2.5 million basic, 6.6 for medium, 12 million for high. And we'll talk a little more about this, but when you actually implement, you don't have to pick everything in the medium, everything in the basic, everything in the high. Those are just to kind of give a range. And we'll talk a little later about working based on your input in phase 1 and working with city staff, how we've kind of come up with a recommended plan, picking from the menu of O&M, asset management, capital projects, and so forth. Just a review of the basic steps to create revenue using a drainage fee. Establish local authority to distribute costs to property owners. The state of Wyoming has already given authority to communities to establish an enterprise like you do for water and sewer. They've added that authority for stormwater. So on the local level, that would mean adopting an ordinance that establishes a fee. And that fee would be based on charging each property. Instead of the meter for water being how much water you used in stormwater, it's how much impervious area do you have, that's the meter. So it doesn't change, unlike water, it's just what you have is what you have. And when that revenue starts coming in, you really have to manage it as a business. It's tracking the revenue, adjusting the charges as needed as the costs may change over time. And last, but definitely not least, communicate the progress and achievements so that the ratepayers see what they're getting for their money. So we kicked off phase 2 in June of 2023. We'll go over details of these steps on subsequent slides, but we developed a public education plan, formed a stormwater focus group so that we could get some input from community leaders. We reviewed and updated those level of service. We prepared a policy decision matrix to go through with staff. You'll see there's a lot of little decisions that go into doing this, and so we've started down that road of getting that input both from the focus group, from staff, and from you. We have completed a preliminary parcel data analysis, so to do this, you have to know how much impervious area is on each parcel. I have a pretty good approximation, and so we've looked at assessor's data. The city has a great project. I think they're about to kick off that will fly a new aerial for the city, and as part of that, they will get impervious area digitized, which is huge for this effort. So we know that's coming. In the meantime, we're doing some things with the data we have now just to know approximately where we stand as we build a cost model for this. And we started coordinating with city staff on how the billing would happen, how an account of impervious area by property would be tied to a bill and sent to a property owner. The public education plan, we set how many meetings and who we're going to meet with. This is the first of 3 council meetings. We have 4 focus group meetings planned. We've had 2 of them already. We'll have 2 meetings with the general public, and then we'll have 1 meeting with targeted stakeholders. That would be, say, an entity that's going to be a big, maybe get a bigger bill to help those owners understand, what's happening and why it's happening, so that they're not surprised when this would be implemented. There's some screenshots of the city's webpage that staff created, and I think we had a meeting last week or week before, and it's been updated already to show what we presented the focus group. The meeting notes are up there, so anybody in the public can go get more information. So the focus group, we'll talk a little bit about that. We developed some background documents so that they could study ahead, learn what their mission is, and we sent invitations. The list of representatives there, that's by no means complete, but includes all those representatives from all those entities and a few more. We had our first meeting in December, our second meeting just a couple weeks ago. And the first meeting really was, an introduction to why we're asking for their input. We're not asking them to develop it from scratch. So we had some people who were very excited and wanted to solve the problem in the first 2 hours. We really started with, what is stormwater management? We don't want to throw around some terms and we want to make sure everybody understands, why we're doing this. That graphic on the side, just let them understand that, or remind them that as you develop property, you end up with water that used to go into the ground, taken up by vegetation, is now becoming runoff, and it's got to be managed in some way. We talked about some of the existing issues in Laramie. We talked about the previous master plans, and then we talked about potential funding solutions, of which a drainage fee is one, but there's grants, there's other options, and how we will, recommend an all of the above approach. Take whatever money you can get. And we talked about the priorities that we're hoping to get from the stormwater focus group. So in that first meeting, here's some of the key feedback we got. What are their expectations from the community for the city management of a drainage system? And see, a lot of it is centered around public safety, traveling during a storm, having an effectively maintained system, property damage prevention. There were, mention of underserved areas, areas where, they don't have curb and gutter for even nuisance storm flows. We did introduce the idea of green infrastructure, and they liked incentivizing that. So green infrastructure would be using vegetated areas to help manage runoff. And a couple of respondents said, we need a drainage criteria manual, which the city is currently developing. And the comment that stood out was the developers are not scared by requirements, but they're scared by uncertainty. So they just want that certainty of tell us what we need to do so that we can plan for that. Other input, some stakeholders thought that monitoring the water quality of discharges from the stormwater system would be a good idea to help determine where the stormwater quality issues are coming from. And they understood that public education is going to be really important so that the community buys into this and sees, what their money is going towards. And that they'll see some change, after something like this is implemented. So meeting 2, a couple weeks ago, we dove into managing stormwater as a business using a drainage fee system. And so we went through the fundamentals of rate development and establishing a stormwater fee. We reviewed those levels of service, and we'll go through the levels of service that we showed you a little later. We went through how drainage fees are established, including some rate modifiers. A lot of communities use credits. That is, if private owners have made an investment on their property that reduces the flooding issues, say they put in a detention pond or a stormwater quality feature, that's an investment they've made that is saving the city some effort, some cost to manage it, and the credit is a way to recognize that and say, well, we're going to take this money off of your bill because of what you've done on site. Elizabeth will talk a little bit more about that. And we asked for their input on key policy questions. So one of those is, what operations should be funded by a drainage fee? All stormwater related operations, just capital projects, just O&M. A lot of the members said, everything should be funded since they all seem to benefit. So even, the process of producing a bill is important, and that should be funded, as well as the capital projects and the O&M. One comment was the city needs to be given flexibility. We don't want to restrain the city so that they're kind of micromanaged and they become less effective, so less restrictions is better on the use of the funding. Other input was that new development should pay more than current development, and that credit should be given for infill development as opposed to, new development on the outskirts of town. We asked them if credits should be incorporated into the rate policy. Some said no. There were, 5 or 6 said no. Several did say credits for commercial properties should be incorporated, but not at the residential single-family home level. Some of the examples of service fee credits would be if you had a detention pond that's reducing the peak flow from a storm event, or maybe it's a retention or an infiltration area that's reducing the volume that comes off your property. Maybe it's a rain garden that's filtering the rainwater, providing a water quality benefit, things like that. So at this point, turn it over to Elizabeth.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Treadway. I work with WSP. I've been in the business of supporting communities like yourself for almost 25 years as a consultant. I'm a former public works director, so I've been on both sides of the fence and trying to manage this particular issue. I'm going to pick this up at the point that Aaron has left off. One of the things we reviewed with the focus group in our last meeting 2 weeks ago was to really understand that a utility structure, which is what we're talking about as an enterprise, a business inside the business of government, it starts with what are all the things that we need to get done, rather than answering the question by limitation. Let's put everything into the pot first before we decide that there are limitations to how much we can both afford and are ready to move forward on. So all of the elements of managing, including that wonderful column called Other. So what goes in Other? All sorts of interesting things go in the bucket, like public education. If you're going to engage the public in assisting in protecting water resources, it's important that they have effective information, that you're a part of ensuring that we get them from the time they're toddlers up to, if you remember where we started, and this tells you how old I am, when we started the big push for recycling, right? So the kids we targeted were kindergartens. There's nothing meaner than a kindergartner to come home to a parent and say to him, no, Daddy, the beer can does not go in the trash. It goes into our recycling bin. So we also believe the same thing's true. If you want to protect water resources, we need to be sure that we're effectively reaching out to the entire community. So I actually went through 2 slides at that. I want to walk us back through what we actually presented in 2022, not in the detail that you see on this screen. That's certainly something that you can individually look at in the time that you would like to. It gets pretty detailed. But what I want to really see that we emphasize to you are the goals that have been established as we've worked with staff, as we got feedback from you, as we are working with the advisory focus group. What is it we're trying to achieve by establishing of sound financial structure for managing stormwater runoff and drainage in the community? So under each of those critical program areas, those goals have been articulated, and we remind our focus group of the goals. We remind you as well. So when we talk about asset management, when we look at the physical characteristics of the system itself, we want to understand understand what is its current condition, what is its age, what is it composed of, what actual products were used in, for example, the pipe network. When were they put in the ground, and what condition are they in now? What is their capacity now? Where are they restricted? So treating this infrastructure as the important asset that it is requires that we invest in inspecting it with routine frequency, that we have a complete inventory of what is out there and how is it functioning, so that to move from reaction to negative impacts to proactively being prepared for and ensuring that we are meeting those goals that our focus group told us about, protecting the safety of individuals, protecting property, ensuring that assets are well maintained. We want to be sure that we have an effective inventory, that it is inspected on a routine basis, that we are able to move the maintenance of that from this reacting to something that fails to being ahead of the game and ensuring that we're investing and on those priorities that Aaron talked about before. When it comes to planning and engineering, this is a critical component of managing the system. Having the technical capacity to ensure that the master plan can be implemented, that those long-term goals can be met, that you have the skill sets and staff that can oversee consultants, contractors, those individuals that are partners in the community to make sure that development occurs in a way that is positive and continues to support the public system. Having standards. Again, one of the interesting elements from the focus group was to hear them say, developers will do what you ask of them. They just don't like ambiguity. Tell us what the standards are that we have to meet. Give us that criteria. And so having effective design standards, having good education tools, helping them understand what green infrastructure is, having contractors who know how to install green infrastructure, critically important. So those are the focus goals around ensuring that you have the technical capacity inside the organization to take on an expanded investment in stormwater. Again, operations and maintenance is just one of those no-brainer things. It's the way we manage our houses, our cars, things that are important assets to us. We need to maintain them. We need to ensure that what you currently have investment in is optimally functioning. That if it's underground, we know the condition it's in, we've opened it up, we've restored it if it's necessary to do so. We are ensuring that what is in the ground is being used to its maximum potential. To do that, we need to be able to move this program from reacting to things happening to it to, again, being ahead of it. This is linked very much back to the asset management side of understanding the inventory, its condition, its age, the important key attributes of the system. And importantly, that what is going into the ground where we can't see it, or what is above ground as it's moving water around the community, is both privately up to standard and connected into the public system at points where the interconnections are functioning effectively. So having this proactive maintenance program is an important long-term investment. Yes, ma'am.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Oh, I just need some acronym help. I always forget. I now know Capital Improvement Project, CIP. What's LOS and?
LOS is level of service.
Okay, and then there was another one on the page before, I think. Let me see. Oh, well, I can't find it. Okay, level of.
Always jump out at us when we do that. We get so used to
GI
it.
program and design.
Green infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's not asking the Army to come and maintain you. No, sorry, green infrastructure. We do. We are so used to our words that thank you for stopping and asking. The component that matches back to planning and engineering is the capital investment program itself. And Aaron laid that out for you, what the master plan is asking for. When we look at the capital investment program, we want to ensure that what we're focusing investment on is meeting the highest priorities of the community. So we want to capitalize the master plan effectively at an investment rate that the community can sustain. We also want to make sure that we're taking advantage of money that can come into the community from outside of Laramie. Now, it can be done through bonds. That's a political decision that you and the leadership of the municipality can work through. But there's also significant grant money available, especially for projects that are quite large. It's actually a matter of making sure that through the engineering analysis and through your capital planning, we are proactively stepping out in front of decision makers that have funds available that you can take advantage of. And there are a whole series of them that come from the federal level that are passed down through the state. There is also investment at the state level. So we want to use all of the resources that may be available, not simply to say, oh, we're going to raise all this money locally. No, we want to leverage whatever can be raised locally to your advantage to utilize and compete effectively for those funds that are out there and being made available to communities all across the United States. And then we cannot forget that we're running a business. So accountability is critically important when you have an enterprise account. You, as Aaron had pointed out, want to be sure that you're tracking effective accomplishments, that you're telling the public what's going on, that we have administrative procedures for accountability, that we work within the financial systems of the city to be sure that you're meeting your goals efficiently and effectively. So we don't want to overlook the fact that there's also an important element in this program that's focused around administration and customer service. So when a citizen calls, we want to be sure that we have appropriate support in place to be able to serve them effectively with the information they need, or to assist them in helping them understand what's being done. So we took the feedback, and this is the same categories of activities of a level of service strategy for all of them, based on some starting out maintaining at a basic level, some starting investment increases at a medium level, and several with a long-term goal to reach a higher level of service. Behind each of those boxes, green, yellow, or red, ultimately will be the financial plan we will bring to you in your next meeting with us. We're working with staff now to translate the commitment of that kind of a strategy into the nuts and bolts of what is it going to cost us to be able to be that successful. And so we have engineering and capital improvements starting out, the two big investment areas starting out actually at a basic level of service. And why? It takes time to build the capacity to move significant dollars into capital projects. It takes time to get those projects in design. It takes time for you to have the project management oversight necessary when you're increasing your investment in capital funds. And so our strategy and discussion with staff at this point is you start those two big areas out, building capacity, while you are maximizing the importance of the existing system through operations and maintenance and your asset management program. Get your inventories in place, get your condition assessment in place, model your system effectively from a data perspective. And excuse me, this cold weather just gives me a terribly runny nose. And also get the staffing capacity, the equipment support, the training in place on operations and maintenance to get ahead of some of the problems that are in the system now. So while you're building your capital investment strategy, you are investing more significantly from a proportional perspective in keeping what is in the ground, what is collecting the system today, what needs to perform at its optimal level, getting those up to snuff faster. And so that's why you see the variation between the yellow and the green and the red boxes. Ultimately, as I say, we are going to bring you what the numbers look like behind these. We'll bring you the staffing profile we think is effective to maximize that. We were working this afternoon with staff in a meeting on trying to flesh out the details of what it will take to execute this plan. The end goal being we want a system that is going to protect life, health, safety, allow for transportation mobility, make sure that water resources as an asset are also being protected at the same time. So we have lots of things we're getting to balance in this process. One of the things Aaron talked about, and I am not going to read this to you, this is only there for emphasis. I want you to see the complexity of what we are working with as we build the policy structure that would work behind the scenes to operate an enterprise account for your drainage system. So there are a host of decisions that we will make. Some can be made with staff. Some are driven by your own financial practices. Some are things that we will bring to you, and we're going to talk in a few minutes with you about 4 questions that we would like to hear some conversation about. But I want you to appreciate that there's a significant body of work that we're working with your staff to build a sound foundation. If you choose to move forward to implement this, you are building this enterprise on a strong foundation of decisions that are practical from an operational perspective, but are built on feedback from our focus group, on yourselves, on staff leadership. So we have a lot of work that we have underway that we are working through. One of the things I'd like Aaron to do is to come back up and talk to you, because this is the technical side, so no jargon, please, that is all about how the rates themselves get established using impervious area as the meter.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I mentioned earlier the city is kicking off a project to fly new aerial imagery, and out of that they will get impervious areas delineated. They'll delineate the driveway, the house, the sidewalks, the sheds. It's going to be a really great product, and so that will allow us to say how much impervious area is on a given parcel. Now, we may not use that down to every single-family home level. That's one of the decisions that will be made. Maybe single-family homes could end up with a flat rate, or maybe there's tiers based on kind of the categories of single-family property sizes. But this will be a great basis because ultimately, it's about equity, people feeling that they're being charged fairly. And if there's a question, the city will have the information to say, well, let's pull this up and take a look and say, okay, here's how we determine what your bill is. You have a house that's 2,000 square feet and a driveway, and it adds up to this, and this is our charge per 500 square feet or per residential unit, and be able to answer questions, really easily, and show that it is developed and fair to each owner. Right now, before we get that data, we're using the county parcel database because the assessor measures a lot of these things. It's not as exact, and as we're coming through it, it's a decent approximation, enough to at least get us in the ballpark for knowing how much impervious area is in Laramie, and we can sample enough, and we're doing some of our own measurements just to track that and check how close it is. One of the things that's interesting to point out, of the 10,000 or so parcels in Laramie, about 75% are residential, 25% are non-residential in rough numbers. But as far as impervious area, that 25% of non-residential is 81% of the impervious area. Those are the properties that are mostly paved over. And one thing to point out, typically in this business, residential, we're really talking about single-family homes. We do tend to lump in apartment buildings into that non-residential, so we probably should say non-single-family home. And there's kind of a breakout on the right-hand side of how it breaks down by certain types of land use. So we have started that coordination with the city's billing staff, the utility staff, to figure out, when a database is developed that shows each parcel has this much impervious area, how can that be translated into a bill? It's got to fit into the current billing systems. There's a lot of technical aspects that we're working through to make sure that can happen. And then when you get a call, who does that call come to? Can the billing department answer a basic question, then refer to engineering if they have a question about the bill and how the impervious area was calculated, that kind of thing. So we're working through that. And I think later this summer, we'll get that data package from the contractor that's doing the aerial imagery, and until then, we're kind of keeping things moving with what we have now. Yeah, so at this point, we'll go through those key policy questions that we're hoping for your input on.
Thanks. So now it's time for you to talk to us about some things that we've asked our focus group and that we've asked staff, but we would really appreciate the perspective of the important group that's sitting here in front of me. And the very first question is one that Aaron emphasized, that we've asked the advisory or the focus group, and that's, what should be funded with this potential new fee? We work with communities that you would think the answer might be quite straightforward. Well, if it's stormwater, it should be funded that way. But in fact, we work with communities who choose to only fund their capital program through their user fee program, who only fund water quality improvements through that. So this is not as straightforward an answer as one might think. Again, our focus group, I think, came to a general belief that we need to invest across the board, and we don't need to hamstring the city from doing what's right, of using these dollars for stormwater. Now, as an enterprise account, they have to be used for stormwater. That's a basic principle behind establishing a utility-based structure. But you can fund only a portion of. It's really a critical question to ask, what is the problem we want to solve with a new revenue stream? And so that's a question you get to help us answer, and your perspective is an important one. And we're not making this not a vote, okay? We're not asking for that, but your perspective on on what is both important and should be considered.
Councilor Doherty, and Councilor Shumway.
I agree that it should be all services, that we don't want to hamstring ourselves. I think I'm curious about what a failure looks like. I mean, I know there's flooding, but when we talk about looking at the infrastructure and doing a proportion of it every year, well, I can ask that later, but I'm curious, it's something I can find out later about how you prevent the failures by inspecting things, but I thought it was a capacity issue, so I'm just curious about that as maybe just as a scientist. And then the other question is, I agreed that it sounded like a lot of people that you queried, that it should be, credits should be for commercial size things, that it would be, I think it would be really difficult to do at the homeowner level. And those other two questions, reasonable time period, that one I have no idea. And then the last one about should all properties pay, I think yes, including the city. That's my 2 cents. Or
Thank you.
6 cents.
Thank you. Councilor Shumway, and then Mayor Harrington.
Thank you. We're going to have some pretty tough decisions to make in the next few years. Let me just point out something I've been thinking about. You indicated that we have 10,000 lots. Some are residential, some are commercial. Right now, the city is investing between $1 million and $1.5 million into stormwater in the basic and the 3 programs you have, which are basic, medium, and high. What we're going to do is we're going to increase that amount of money that's going into this, which from what I saw here, it's $2 million, $5 million, $10 million. And doing the numbers, we have citizens and also business owners that have not paid for stormwater for 150 years. And all of a sudden, we're going to have, because it's been coming out of the general fund, what we're going to have is we're going to introduce a new enterprise fund, which means that everyone will participate. And doing just simple, which may be way off math, I'm figuring if we just do $2 million, it's going to be between $10 to $20 per month per household. If we do the medium, it'd be probably $50 per household. If we do the high, it's $100 per month per household. They're going to come after us with pitchforks. That is not something that they want to do because for 150 years they've paid nothing. So we have a great responsibility for, safety, for managing the city, protecting properties and things like that. But this is going to be a huge impact on our community just because all of a sudden there's a new enterprise fund that they're going to see in their utility bill. And for some, it's going to be a very significant increase in what they've been paying to the city. It worries me. I don't want to jump into this and solve everything in 5 to 10 years. We have got to take this at a pace that that the citizens can manage.
Thank you.
Mayor Harrington.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think to get to these questions, I'm favorable to us funding all of the services provided in the stormwater fund. If we imagined that were created, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. And then to the point of credits, one of I think that ratio of sort of like the percentage that is commercial versus the percentage of impervious surface, to me that's notable, and that does make sense that we should be working at that because it seems like the place that we could have the most impact on decreasing impervious surface or sort of like preventing the need for sort of expanding this system, because that feels to me like one of the places that we'll spend the most money is if we have to upsize the system as the city grows. And then I think maybe to the final question, I do think everyone should be participating in this. And so I'd like to include everyone. for whatever that's worth. And I think to the bigger question, and I'm sorry to just throw all these things at you, I just got a quiet moment with kids, so I'm just going to keep throwing stuff at you. But the final question about whether what we're really trying to solve with this, I think, there's no need to look beyond sort of West Laramie after a rainstorm, North 4th Street after a significant rainstorm, to know sort of like what the amount of money that we need to solve this issue. So, I think freeing up more dollars in the general fund for emergencies, sort of like emergencies in this system or others, would be meaningful, but funding this more sustainably so we aren't seeing these consistent problems and being able to maintain and inspect the system in a more timely manner, to me, feels really important. So no questions, just comments there, but I appreciate it.
Councilor Gabriel.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. To go along with Councilor Shumway's comments, certainly we're going to have to be very careful about how we proceed with this, since people have not been paying in the past, but we still need to do something. I'm kind of leaning towards the possibility of grant funding and who can answer that question when it comes up, maybe down the line here tonight as we proceed, but how feasible is that, and how much money is available that the city could possibly be eligible for. Thank you.
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. I guess my question would be, do we have a sense of how much the rate increase would be? Councilor Shumway kind of threw some numbers out there. Is there a ballpark number that we're looking at for this?
We do not at this
not there
time.
yet.
We are refining those numbers now.
Okay.
As we build the profile with working with staff. I think it's important for you to hear from your consultants that we hear you on those issues all the time. You are in control of this decision, not us. And what we will present to you are those kinds of options. The idea of what can you sustain? What can you do to start with? Where are you trying to head ultimately? What does that financial forecast look like? So the decision is always in your hands as to the concept of affordability and the rate of change over time, which is why we ask questions like, how fast do you want to eat the elephant? You know you have a $30 million problem that potentially over time can expand when simply the value of dollar changes. So it really will be an opportunity for us to bring back to you those different levels of investment and what it is that's important and tolerant to the community to be able to take on a change in funding source. We have quite an inventory that we've built on grant funding, the amount of dollars that are being sent down, again, federally, tremendous amount of money that's coming in capital investment in infrastructure that you would be eligible for in various categories. So we're researching all of that to help you make that decision.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Then to follow up, I also would be in favor of the broad spectrum of items to be funded. I think that sometimes those grant funds shift and can be specific to one area and not another one. So I like the idea of flexibility of our staff to shift as those sources of funding, outside sources of funding, shift as well. Credits, I am in agreement there. And similar to Councilor Doherty, I have no idea on a time period. I hope other people have expertise in the room because that is not mine. And all properties paying. Yes, I guess the one caveat I would maybe have to that is, could there be something implemented, or how much work would it be for staff to do something that is, as we're looking at, we have the property tax reduction for those folks who are lower income. Is there something that if those folks who are really struggling to stay in their homes right now, could we implement some sort of a program that allows them to find additional support or lower fees, something like that?
Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, thanks. Seems like it's my turn to go next here. I agree. I think, all services should be included. In terms of credits being incorporated, I guess it's not that I don't understand it, but I think if I were to be given an example of what a credit could be, like when I think of a detention pond, is that something that would be a credit? I don't exactly know if I understand what constitutes a credit.
The basic principle of a credit is to acknowledge a private investment on private property that, in the long term, reduces the long-term financial burden on public dollars for the public system. Now, that's a long answer to. It's typically physical infrastructure that is assisting in reducing the volume or the amount that actually is discharged over time, that allows a slower release of the runoff, that reduces that peak period where the entire system is being heavily burdened. They are private dollar investments that are recognized as a value added to benefit the overall operation of the public system. And so as we look at that issue, we can bring examples of what other communities have adopted, what strategies are used. They are not gifts. They are not easy to obtain. You have a responsibility to all the other folks that are making contribution that may not be eligible or may not ever want to make that investment, but they want to be sure that their dollars are being balanced and handled in a fair and equitable way. So they're not easy to get. This is not a giveaway program. This is not a reimbursement. Oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to build something and I'm going to have the city pay for it. It's not that. It's recognizing that that private investment has benefited the public system. But we'll bring you very specific examples.
Okay, thank you. And that would be helpful, but and based on what you explained, I think I am supportive of that, especially if it's a private investment for the public good, right? So that's good. Reasonable time frame. I know that there's parts of this community that are in dire and desperate need of better drainage during storms, or even when it just rains generally, or spring thaw. So that $30 million investment, I think not knowing what that equates to on a monthly bill, but I think in order for folks who are living in that part of town where it gets really bad, we need to take care of, right? And so we really need to know and help those folks, because their property value, right? Who's ever going to move there? How are they ever going to sell? What becomes of that part of town if it continually, gets flooded? I mean, water damages things repeatedly, and that's not a good situation. So however that equates, I think, to the monthly bill, I think that's absolutely important, that we really look at those very high priority areas and do the best we can to take care of that, because some of the horror stories that we hear, I mean, it's horrific, right? So we have to do that. It's just pretty much that simple. And yeah, I think we all need to pay it, right? So.
Councilor Shumway?
Thank you. I know we have here that we're only focusing right now on high priority projects, which is the $30 million. I think we need to also remember that that's just a very small, it's going to be at least 130 million or more that we're going to have to put into stormwater runoff. So this is just a beginning, and this is one where we go after those things where people are in danger of losing your property and constantly have flooding and all that. But I just want to make sure that we go after grants, that we do everything we can to use the general fund and everything we can to take the impact off of our residents and our businesses in town so that they don't turn around and start getting bills that they just really can't afford.
Mayor Harrington.
No comments here. It's
Councilor
Councilor
Newman.
Newman. Vice Mayor, no problem.
So I agree with most of the counselors. We should be doing all services. And then just to mirror what Counselor Shumway said, looking for those grants and whatnot, because I wouldn't want the public to come at us with, pitchforks. If the numbers thrown out were real, raising the bills up to $100 a month would be a problem. But that's all I wanted to say.
Well, Counselor Pierce.
Yeah, sorry. And I could just add, just for the folks that are listening or potentially in the room that don't know, our city staff does a great job when it comes to getting those grants and finding grants for whatever the need happens to be. So I think we can really rest assured that they will be very diligent in their work when it comes to reducing those costs as much as we can. And also, I think, just one more thing, I think as a council, we need to remember that when we put that 6 cent, this last 6 cent, we had stormwater. It was it, and people supported that. So they're fully aware of the issues that we have in this community. They may not know what it's going to cost them every month, and we don't know that yet, but they're aware, and they're supportive of the work, and they know the need, right? I think so.
I also support all services. I think as a intricate system that it's important that all parts of the system be working and that we not cherry pick one part over the other, that the system gets maintained. As far as credits go, I do think credits would be, I really like the idea of incentivizing and the idea of incentivizing people to do things that would help with wastewater, with stormwater flow. I was very interested in I'm going to round it off, 20% of flow coming from residential and 80% from commercial or other paved surfaces. So I think that's quite a concern, and that it may be that part of the burden does need to go to those that contribute more to it. But then the double edge of that is, does it inhibit business development and growth, by shifting that charge that way? Reasonable time period, looking at the amount of money that this is going to take, I just don't see where the members of the community are in a position right now to handle that. So achieving grants and other types of funding are really going to be necessary in order to move through. And I think that our ability to obtain grants will begin to designate how quickly we can move, because the burden that we can put on community members is only so much. But I agree with Councilor Pierce that we have some areas in town that need immediate attention, and that it doesn't take a 50-year rain for some people to be impacted. It can be just a simple storm, and they're impacted and flooded. So, and then, yes, I think we should all contribute to it so that it should be a broad fund. But those would be mine. Councilor Shumway.
Well, a couple more things. One, the city of Laramie has always participated in paying for the cost of water and also wastewater, and we will continue to do so for the facilities we have. I would suggest in this survey, the study that we do, that we look very carefully at university properties and make sure they pay their fair share. And also, the surfaces that, are parking surfaces, things like that, we need to make sure that the burden does not fall on the small businesses and the residential people alone. We need to make sure that those, large businesses and schools and things like that pay their share.
Any other comments? Councilor O'Doherty.
I don't know if this is an appropriate time or if it's Aaron in the weeds again, but so my question about what failure looks like, is it the actual storm drains underground when you talk about doing inspections, like to get into a 3-year cycle? So is it just putting cameras down those storm drains and then looking all around? And then as new, but a lot of places it's gullies. So I can inspect those. I mean,
Well, and it is the entire system, so it's all interconnection. So we're not talking about only that which is out of sight. That takes a bit more sophisticated equipment to be able to go down the pipe. It also requires at times that the pipe itself has to be cleaned first. Can't see it because it's clogged. So what is a failure? The inability for the system to carry the flow for which it was designed to handle. And you have the design occurrence at different types of storm events, right? And so that's a failure. Anytime the water is not able to hit the pathway that it was intended in order to carry it away from the community.
So how does it manifest, like in a storm drain is coming from one street and it's meeting another street? If that failure is the intersection, does it just saturate all of the, do you get street failures there and all? I'm trying to picture what happens, because I just see the overflow, but, or it just seeps up and then it's flowing across.
So if you have a pipe collapse, then yes, you can get street failure to go right along with it. If the pipe itself is collapsed and the water's no longer able to flow, it's going to find some pathway. And so it becomes erosive. So you'll see that open channels start to lose their capacity because they erode. They have silted in, they have debris laying in them. They no longer can carry the flow that they were designed to do. So failure comes in all different types and sizes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you. This might be a question for city staff, but I'll just throw it out. But going back a few years, back in the 70s, I used to live next door to the city engineer, Bob Juvie. City manager remembers Bob, some of you might. So he told me about a system that they were going to establish, and that's drainage ponds. They had very few back then, and this was going to really help the city. And so this is an elaborate plan, we need them in this area, and this area. So I'm just curious, going back all those years, how are we doing now with drainage ponds? Are we adequate? Do we need a lot more?
Well, we have a few experts in the room that can answer that question. Whether you want it or you want it because you studied them, but
Yeah, sure.
hop up here. I mean, they can tag team. How long do you want to talk about this?
I know we've come a long way.
Yeah, Your Honorable Mayor, through you, I will let Aaron kind of add on because WSP did complete the citywide, which really dived into that. In short, we do need quite a few more. A lot of areas that were already developed were lacking, and that's where we're seeing a lot of those issues. Any new development going in, we're making sure that they are getting ponds. The drainage criteria manual that was noted is only going to improve on that and help develop that criteria more and make sure that we're getting fully what we need. We already are, but it'll help define that better. So we are putting new ponds in commercial developments as they go in. If a residential big development's going in, we're making sure that pond is going in. But there's a lot of areas in the town that were developed over the years that we don't have stormwater infrastructure existing at all in those areas. And that definitely hurts the system, and that's what drives that cost up that we're seeing so much of that 130 million is just, there's just nothing there. So you have to find property to put a pond in. You have to then run that pipe. Some of that pipe is very large. I think like 4x10 box culverts that we're putting in Wyoming Avenue right now, which is, it's huge pipe for Laramie really that we're seeing going in. And that's what we need to handle that water that's kind of coming down. And Aaron, I don't know if you have more you want to add on that, but.
Yeah, I mean, that was really good. So the modeling that the city has done to determine where the shortfalls are did include all those ponds if they were maintained, by the city or university, so they're still functioning. And what it has shown is they do help, but like Eric said, a lot of areas just were built out without them. One thing we did find that was some of them were underutilized, and so the city has already done one project, we got a couple on the books to optimize those ponds so that they function better. We found out that some of them weren't filling all the way, they were kind of letting water out before it filled up all the way, able to add some water quality features to some of them. Some of the high priority projects, the city is already checking off the ponds up by the high school, behind the rec center, the pond across the street from the high school on Beach Street, the Wyoming Avenue stormwater system. Those are all master plan high priority projects that they're checking off. And the ponds on 22nd Street are the ones I was referring to. One has been constructed, and I think two are kind of planned for coming years. Yep.
Councilor O'Doherty.
So I'm obsessed with failure of pipes. Aaron, just get an engineering degree. So I'm wondering, is that the kind of thing that can be helped with liners? Or is it just too massive? Like, I know you can use liners for sewer pipes, but storm sewers, I mean,
yeah.
Can we assume that a lot of them are bad and start lining? I guess that's my question.
So yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And part of the cost model that Elizabeth mentioned that we're working with city to develop will include capital projects, but it'll include an annual lining budget. The city does some right now already with their current, they do some sewer and some storm with the limited money they have from general fund, but absolutely, they don't know right now which pipes are good candidates for stormwater lining, or which ones, really need it, which ones are too far gone and just need replacements. That inspection will lead to that, but ultimately they hope to be able to inspect it and have an active lining program, because that's a very efficient way. If the capacity is adequate, lining it will extend the life. Yep.
Thank you for the engineering lessons.
And I just want to say I'm in strong support of the continued move toward proactive. And I think that we're already moving in that direction. And we got the report from Director Webb where we're tracking breaks per year and have gone from over 100 to 40. And I think that type of effort is commendable, and that we need to continue to support moving in a proactive direction. Any other questions or comments? I don't see anything online. Thank you for the discussion. And for right now, may I turn it over to public, or do you have more to present?
but it got hung up, and I don't know why it won't move. Anyway, we had a slide, there you go, of where we go from here. So there are a number of things that we've already talked to you about, that we're building the cost model, we're building options and different levels of service and what the price impact would be. That all comes back to you again in another work session where we can really look at those issues of affordability, look at the strategies around what should we target for grants and outside resources, as well as then what is the bottom line that would have to go into a new revenue source. So we'll bring all that back to you, a whole host of policies, another set of questions we would ask you to help us understand and really to work through that administrative responsibility of how this would move forward, and then ultimately bring to you an ordinance that would take you into the decision process. So those are the things that are outstanding for us.
Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thanks. So are we talking 6 months, 9 months?
We're working on a schedule that staff has directed to us that would have us coming back to you. This is March, actually. So probably May timeframe with the next workshop, and then ultimately September with do you want to go forward or don't you? And at that go, no-go kind of decision, we would then work to establish the technical structure for an ordinance. It would go into your public comments and review period and that kind of thing. But that's the timeline, excuse me, that we're working towards.
Great, thank you. Just
You're welcome.
curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you. I get to do this a lot with different elected bodies. You've been so engaging, and it's so helpful. We are trying to help you, but you are helping us, and I do appreciate it. We both really appreciate getting your feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Webb, are you coming? Okay.
Look,
Yes.
just a couple things to close out here. First, I wanted to thank Elizabeth and Aaron for tonight. They do a fantastic job. She just talked about the next steps. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take 2 seconds to go back 4 years and tell you how we got where we are. So is what has been driving us this whole time is your policy goals, right? Back in 2021, your policy goal was to explore stormwater and municipal enterprise to ensure sustainability and functionality of the utility for both current and future residents. That was 21. And then each subsequent year, you've also had policy goals geared around storm drainage, as you know. And so that's really what's been driving us as we move forward. The one other thing I wanted to bring up was a lot of talk about grants. We actually have 2 funding assistant requests in right now with the NRCS. They have some funds available right now for the watershed protection and flood prevention program. And those 2 projects total about $22 million. Our requests are up for review in second quarter, so starting in April, we'll be starting to meet with NRCS, and fingers crossed we can get some funding there for those. It's 2 of our high priority projects that we need to get done, big projects. So we're working in progress with that. So thank you for tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite public comment. If you're in the audience, please come to the podium. If you're online, please raise your hand. No? Seeing none, then, good evening.
Hello. Christopher Stratton, 1569 North 6th Street, Laramie, Wyoming. I definitely think that, it's a good thing. We definitely do need to make money to make things work, but I come on the end of why should we be paying for something whenever a single rainstorm floods our yard? So, I hope that it comes to the point of us being able to resolve the problems before we start having to pay money into a system that's not working, period, for us. The other big one that I had noticed is the focus group that was utilized for this has one key element missing, and that is the community. You're definitely focusing on the University of Wyoming, you're focusing on the city and businesses within the downtown area to come up with a program that is going to definitely come out of a lot of our pockets, and there is not much community involvement in it. There's business and there's college involvement, which, yeah, they're going to be paying a lot of money, and I hope that it's brought into a system that is fairly brought into that, so that us that are residential customers aren't paying Walmart's fair share or the University of Wyoming's fair share, as it seems like we unfortunately do a lot. The other big end that I was going to bring up is, and I don't know legalities of that, but like for discounts for houses, that type of thing, are we able to collect rainwater? Are we able to utilize that for watering our lawns and maybe get a discount on that? But I don't know if that works, because I think there's also some laws hindering rainwater collection. So it's something that should be brought to mind and see if we need to do something in that way to make it so that maybe people who have small yards, et cetera, aren't having to pay as much and can get a little bit of a discount just because we're able to hold the water and actually water our lawns with it. But I think that there may be problems with current laws allowing for that. That's it. Pretty much all that I have to say. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments? Seeing none. Any further comments or questions? Councilor?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I had noticed that as well on that chart, that there weren't community members, but then in thinking about that, the next step processes in my mind is where there would be some more community input. Is that correct? Will there be something that is more focused on community moving forward? Just for clarification.
Yes, you are correct. We do have two public meetings scheduled in this effort, and I probably should have listed everybody on the committee. There were others that I think would fall into that community category. We had some people who just found out about it and showed up, and they're interested, and they're in the group now. And
Councilor,
thank you.
And I think everybody there is also a resident, but it was, point well taken. Yep.
Councilor Doherty?
Oh, I want to point out that we do have the Planning Commission, and that's members of the community, and there's an EAC member that was appointed to the working group, so we do have people from our boards.
All right, I think that concludes our discussion. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to continue?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, I can take it from here.
Thank you.
We'll close with that work session, so we'll move on to council updates and comments. And I think we'll start with Councilor O'Doherty.
No updates.
Councilor Shumway?
I do want to mention that the WAM Winter Conference just concluded this past week. Several of us participated in that. We had some great workshops, a lot of information. We had an update on all the legislative issues that are coming down, and also we had some good training. It was, in my mind, a very productive week in Cheyenne. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Councilor Shumway. And I appreciate all of you that made it over to WAM. Councilor Pierce?
Yeah, I don't have any updates at this time. Thanks.
I have,
The only updates I have, sorry, Vice Mayor, in my mind, I'm going exactly in order, or else I know I will mess this up because I can't see council chambers. So the airport board did not meet this month. There was a scheduling conflict. The meeting was canceled. Pilot Hill met. They are continuing to work through their trailhead requirements for the city, and things seem to be going great. So hopefully we'll have something sorted out soon. And that's all I have. Councilor Vice Mayor Cumby.
I attended Planning Commission yesterday. We welcomed our new member, Jana White. They gave a brief report on the West Side meetings, and the two interns were able to get quite a number of people. The day meeting had 28, the evening meeting had 30. Joseph describes it as a robust and passionate conversation.
I was there. I should have mentioned it. I was there. I thought there were more than 30 in the evening, like 40 maybe, but it was
So,
good.
yeah, they said it was very positive, and that some of the issues that they had were zoning. They want to kind of keep down the industrial usage and to have more residential type zoning. The concerns are infrastructure, stormwater, and design standards. That they enjoy their community because of the feeling of neighborhood, that it's quiet, that it has a rich history, and that it's quaint. The other thing that they did, which I thought was really positive, was to review city council goals and to look at and discuss the way that the goals help to guide their own work. And their plan is now to establish planning commission goals and objectives that, while focusing on the main duties of planning and zoning, will incorporate a view and consideration of what council goals are. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Newman?
Quick update on Youth Council. On President's Day, they went to the Capitol and toured that. Ran into a couple counselors there. Councilor Somerville and Councilor Richardson got to talk to him as well. They met with WAM, and then they got to see the Senate and the House, where they were recognized as well. And afterwards, there was some pretty good talk of they didn't know how much actually went into the politic world and whatnot. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Councilor Richardson?
None at this time.
Councilor Gabriel?
Mayor, can I insert a comment at this time? I have no updates.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
My comment is on 15th and Ivinson. I was wondering, we just all found out recently that 15th and Ivinson is going to be shut down for several months through graduation. And it said in the release that they're working with the city to organize what that actually means. And I'm just kind of wondering, does that mean north and southbound on 15th Street through the campus is not going to be available for the next couple of months? Or are they going to make provisions where people can go north and south on 15th through campus? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Mayor, through you, I think Brooks is gone, but I will tell you, we have received the request from the university for that closure. As you know, our policy has been and will continue to be to try to keep open at least lanes for emergency vehicles so that our ability to respond for police, fire, and ambulance is as minimally impacted as possible. But with that being said, we've known from the beginning that there is a big batch of underground work that will be coming up that may require full closure for a period of time in order to make those critical connections underneath 15th Street. So I know Public Works is working through that, and they're navigating with the university on how to minimize the closure, but I think it is something the community will see, that we will have to close that road entirely for a portion of time. Their excavation is so deep, there's just no way. But we think this is that time, and once we get past that, we will continue working to not allow that closure. Not only does it impact the public, right, but it is, more importantly, an impact on our emergency services capability and ability to respond. So I don't know that they've arrived at the final traffic control plan, but they've been reviewing that now for a couple of weeks with the university.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilor Gabriel. I think we've all been wondering. All right, folks, we'll move on to agenda review. If y'all want to take a quick look at the agenda for next week.
Mayor, if I could just let you know that today I received a request from Assistant City Manager to add in 4 sets of minutes from the Parks, Tree, and Rec Advisory Board. So just wanted to make that change noted to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, City Clerk.
And Mayor, when you're ready, I had a comment on item 15 I wanted to clarify for the council.
Go ahead.
Council, on item 15, I just realized that I titled this incorrectly. You will actually be identifying nominees to the Albany County Transportation Authority Board that will have to be formally appointed by the Board of Commissioners. So just a slight change, but there are 2 positions on that board for City of Laramie representatives, and I'm recommending that it is the city manager and a member of the governing body, and then you ultimately will decide who to nominate.
And council members, for that item, as well as the Human Rights Commission, I would just encourage you all to be considering who has bandwidth to take on another board and commission. All right. Any other questions, council members? All right. Well, with that, council members, I guess we'll call it. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, especially you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate you keeping us on the rails.